Good morning. I'm here with Karen Schumacher. Karen has a book out that's incredible that I just read. It's called More Than Your Mindset. And here's a copy of it. So anyway, today we're going to talk to Karen Schumacher. Karen's field is in leadership development, personal coaching. She does a fantastic job, so we're here to welcome Karen.
You're listening to the What's Happening podcast with Gary Watts.
Good morning, Karen. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me, Gary.
How was your weekend?
Good. Yeah.
No deer hunting or anything?
Not this weekend.
Not this weekend.
It was last weekend.
So I'm glad you could make it. We're here to talk about your new book, More Than a Mindset, and More Than Your Mindset. Get it right. Tell us a little bit about your background. Tell us a little bit about where you come from, and then how you got to the point where, I know I've talked to you over the years where you're going to write a book, and here it is. So can you get into a little bit about, your background, maybe where you went to school, what you did, and then how you got to the point through leadership development that you wanted to write a book? I'm intrigued by the why here.
Sure, absolutely. So a little bit about my background. Grew up in Chicago, moved to Iowa when I was in college, got a job when I lived in Dubuque, and it moved me to Cedar Rapids, and then my life just took root here and then kept going.
How long you been in Iowa?
Oh, my gosh. Did not tell me I was going to have to do math this morning. Longer than I lived in, how about this? I moved out of Illinois when I was about 22, 23, okay. So over 20 years.
Okay, great.
Okay, yeah. My background as far as leadership development, learning and development, so I always wanted to be a teacher. And maybe this isn't in the classroom with students that you might consider like elementary and high school, but I am an adult teacher. So I do leadership development, soft skills training, personality styles training. And when I was in training, and then I went into leading the departments, and my whole career has been focused around that. A lot around executive coaching, personal coaching, training. And then about 10 years ago, so next year I'll celebrate 10 years being in business for myself, I had something that changed, and I started a whole new chapter doing this and taking all of that background. Now, the book itself is interesting because I always thought my first book would be something different than what this one was. And it was about 2006 or 7. I was asked to come speak to a group of women who were looking for mindset changes on how to see themselves more positively and differently in the workspace. And so I put it together and it went well, and then I was asked to do it again and again and again. But after doing more research, it wasn't just for women. It's for everybody and anybody who needs to think differently about themselves or about their circumstances. So as I started to put that into a workshop and then started to do it as keynote speaking, people kept saying, you need to turn this into a book. And I was like, really? And so I did, and here we are today.
And that started, the thought process in the book was back to 2006.
Mm-hmm.
Really? Wow, that's 16 years ago, huh? Tell us a little more. I know you did some personality work with our company, and I think the 4 colors. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about how that's worked for you, and it's been amazing with trying to understand when you're in the workplace different personalities and how to work with them.
Not even in the workplace, but in our personal lives as well. So the program I use is called Real Colors, and the whole essence is that personality style-wise, we have all 4 styles in us. We just have a preference of where we like to operate, typically our top 2 colors. Well, imagine, if we're going to relate it back to this topic, imagine if one person is more people-focused and they're high emotional intelligence and they put others before themselves, and somebody else is their opposite, which is analytical, they're logical, they don't like being wrong, and they like to research. And it's not about them being wrong, but they don't want their whole company. Well, those 2 individuals will communicate differently. So a lot of times we have people who have this mindset, they just don't listen, they don't care, when the reality is they're just speaking in their own language. So how do we shift that? How do we help people see and hear differently when we're speaking and interacting?
It's very intriguing because, we all have a little bit of those, the four personalities, we all have a little bit of them. Some are more dominant than others. But I think how to interrelate with people that have a little different personality than you have is critical in the workplace. I think that's neat. You said you mentioned that when you started out, you were working with women. Did you feel more comfortable with that first approach with dealing just with women?
Not
On their
necessarily.
needs?
I mean, as a woman, speaking of the woman, that's always probably a little bit easier because you have a different type of way of relating or different experiences in the workplace of maybe how women are looked at or treated, but not necessarily because men or say the younger adults that are entering the workplace or older adults that are trying to exit, they all have different reasons and different circumstances, and it's about listening. It's listening to them and then helping them from where they're at.
Great. So let's get back to the book. Let's go back more into the why. So you started, how long, you started thinking about the book in 2006. So when did you start writing down things? When did you start to formulate the book? Tell us a little bit more about, I'm more intrigued about the why, how you came to the conclusion to write it and what you were thinking about.
Actually, it's probably one of the positive things that happened during COVID. So when everything shut down in the world and I didn't have classes to teach and clients to go to, I thought, well, what am I going to do at this time? So let's write. And so from about March 2020 until June of this year, when it finally got published, that's what I did. I focused on the book.
Great. Well, let's get into the book a little bit. And can you go through the free part of the book, the FREE?
Yeah.
I think we could probably talk all day about that, but I think that's the intriguing part of talking about free, what that means and how it relates to the book. And
So more than your mindset, how to live a more positive and an energized life. So use the acronym FREE to break the book into the 4 chapters. So FREE stands for how do you formulate your thoughts, how do you reinvent you, how do you engage with others, and how do you energize yourself, with the whole premise that you'll be set free from negativity as you work your way through the book.
Tell me more about negativity. I mean, it's in
It's so
every
contagious,
part,
right?
Yeah, every part of our lives is, it seems like when you're thinking a negative thought, it takes 10 positives to compensate for that negative thought. So
Yeah.
just talk about negative feelings a little bit.
I mean, negativity, negative thoughts, negative feelings, right? It's like you just said, once you get the smoke going, it turns into fire so fast. And to compensate it, the 10 positive thoughts or surrounding yourself with positive people, that negativity just has a way of sometimes taking over someone's mindset. And then once they start thinking a certain way, they start talking a certain way. And then they start behaving a certain way. And they start treating people a certain way. You asked about travel, or maybe, I don't know, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. Maybe you asked what I did this weekend. I was traveling back from being in California for the last week. And just watching with weather changes and delays and how people may have been so excited about where they were going change in a moment when they found out that they had to sit there. Or when we finally made it back to Cedar Rapids, we got in maybe 5-10 minutes late, but we sat on the plane at the gate or near the gate for almost an hour.
In Cedar Rapids?
In Cedar Rapids, right? We could get off and we could walk. But just listening and watching the people, because we were that close, instead of going, wow, we're that close, we're almost home, it was, why can't we just find a different gate? And everyone becomes an expert in that moment of what we should do.
Right.
And so, yeah.
Well, a lot of that comes from you're not in control.
Right.
And there's nothing you can do about it.
Right.
So you either got to kind of take it and sit there and think about something else, or you go somewhat crazy.
So Stephen Covey talks a lot about that, right? The circle of concern and the circle of control. So the circle of concern are all of the things that we can't do anything about. If it's going to snow this weekend, right? Not being able to get back home to see my family in Chicago. If somebody else is having a bad day and taking it out, I can't control that. But what I can control are the things that, like my behavior, my attitude, the way I think. And so when I was on the plane, when everybody else was complaining, I was just talking quietly with my neighbor. We were talking more positively. And then that sort of lent its way out to a small perimeter. but then others around started to pick up on that.
Right. So the way I see it, with your mindset book is you have to, the brain is almost like a muscle. So you have to train it like you talk about. What are some ways to train it to work? Because everybody can get negative. I mean, to me, after all you went through, then you're sitting on a tarmac. To me, travel and flying and is somewhat frustrating or can be and stressful. So how do you, I mean, we're all going to run into stressors. We're all going to have stress in our lives. How do you, you can't really avoid it. So mentally, how do you prepare for it? What do you do when it happens? What are some things you can share with us?
One thing I talk about in there is what you look for is what you'll find. So if you're in a situation and you've created this theory that this is going to be negative, terrible, uncomfortable, every piece of evidence you collect will support that theory because that's what you're looking for.
Right.
Or you could say, yeah, this is a terrible thing that I'm in, but what are some of the positives that could come from it? And so then you start listening and looking for the opposite. So you're right. It is training your mindset. It's not just something that happens overnight. Reading one book isn't going to change you to be super negative to being super positive. And actually, the book is a self-help book. So I broke it down to give some personal stories and then some anecdotes of what I've done. And then throughout the book, there's opportunity for you to answer some questions, journal about a couple things, and put some of the stuff into practice. So hopefully when you're done reading it, you'll have more positive strategies to apply.
Can you go back into the free again? Maybe do each chapter, start with F, and just break it down a little bit more for us so we can talk about it.
So how do you formulate your thoughts? As I said, what you look for is what you'll find. If you want to think that your boss is a jerk, you're going to find every piece of evidence to say that your boss is a jerk.
Right.
Or if you want to say that your neighbor is a jerk or whomever, that's what we look for. So what are some of the positives? For instance, one day when my husband and I, it was just the two of us, it was 4th of July, and I said, let's go get some ice cream. I'll even drive. And he's like, all right. So we went to Dairy Queen. And the way we entered, we would have been next in line, kind of going around the curve to get to the drive-thru. And somebody came in off the street, and they came in, and they saw me. They knew I was there, but they were not going to let me in. Now, I could have been like, you're a jerk or whatever, and I did try to inch my way in, but didn't yell or scream. And he was like out his window, names and what have you. I was like, what is going on? So I could have had that mindset, and I could have responded in that same fashion. However, I just let him go through. And on the back of his truck, I noticed that there was a sticker, and he was a veteran. So in my mind, I can tell myself a different story. I could say, this guy is grumpy and a jerk, or I could say, he fought for my freedom, and this is the 4th of July, and maybe he's thinking, people are not appreciating him. Maybe he's thinking, I fought for your freedom, lady, and you think that you're going to cut me off. Yeah. So when we ordered, we paid for his, right? Just to show a little kindness. Maybe that type of stuff will be contagious. So what we think is how we act. So formulating our thoughts. Reinventing yourself is about your personal brand. How do you want to be remembered, right? So the things you say and do, would you be okay if they were replayed on the news tonight? Or if somebody showed a video of how you responded to your child or your spouse or your grandparent or your pastor or anybody? If you wouldn't want them to see how you behaved or you would be embarrassed, check it. Figure out what that is. The first E is how do you engage with others? And so how do you build relationships? How do you build trust? Are you trustworthy? So that walks you through all different ways to build that. And then the final E is how do you engage yourself? How do you energize yourself throughout the day? Because we get depleted. In fact, when you woke up this morning, were you tired?
Yeah, I was. I went for a long walk at the farm the other day.
Okay, so
up and down the hills.
If you wake up tired, that's sad, right? Because we should have just gotten a good night's sleep.
Right.
But this whole world, we wake up already depleted. Like our gas tanks are only half full or half empty. And we've got to go out throughout the day figuring out how to keep it full so we can keep that energy going. So going for a walk is a good idea. Right. Taking deep breaths. Taking a moment and doing 5-minute exercises at your desk. just something so if you're not your best self, you can't serve others to help them be the best that they can be.
In everything that you talk about, tell us a little bit what your thoughts are for where you came from, your family or your current family or your background. How does that affect the way you act and think?
You should never forget where you come from. And my mom and dad worked hard. My dad worked 2 jobs at times to help support all 4 of us children. And my mom, we lived in a very modest home. There were 6 of us living in this house, and we all had somebody to share a room with. So my sister and I had our bedroom, my brothers had a bedroom, and my parents had a bedroom. We always had food to eat. We always had a house to live in. But, I didn't always have brand new clothes or brand new things like friends did. And I remember one time a friend gave me a pair of her designer jeans. And back in the 80s when I was in the high school, I don't know if you remember, it looked like girls would jump out of helicopters to get those jeans on because they were so tight. Mine were so baggy, I had to wear them with a belt, but I didn't care because it felt like this was something that was a brand. And so I learned really quickly, it wasn't about that type of brand, but your personal brand. And that's where my mom and dad really instilled in us hard work, being generous, being kind, and not letting all these little things in the life. Don't take note of them. Don't take inventory. Don't hang on to that. So.
You mentioned a veteran. The other day I bought somebody walked in with, must have been National Guard, I don't know. But he had a full uniform on, and I bought him lunch. And I was trying to hide because I didn't want anybody to know that I did it, but he came over and shook my hand, and I thanked him for his service. But just that one small thing, it makes you feel so much better. And to thank our veterans or police folks or sheriff or whatever.
Yeah.
And we don't do enough of that. No. Another thing that I found that's interesting to me is when you go out for dinner, talk to the waitress or the waiter. Most people don't. They just take it for granted. Here's how I want my steak. I want a medium well or whatever you want. Ask them questions. Where'd you come from? How long you been here? And it's amazing what you'll find out if you just talk to people. Everybody has a story. And we usually never take the time to we just kind of, hey, how you doing, and walk away. We don't really sit and listen to them. Yeah. But everybody has, it's the holidays right now. Christmas is coming up. We got a storm coming in. There's a lot of emotion around the holidays, but it's a great time to connect with people, I think.
Yeah, and to remember that there are some people out there who have lost someone. Maybe it was recently this year. Maybe it's in the past, and that emptiness.
Right.
And it shouldn't just be Christmas time. It shouldn't just be the holiday time where we think about that. We should be thinking about that all year round.
Right.
But you're right. Everybody has a story. And we shouldn't have a contest to find out who has the best of the worst stories. But if we just stop to ask questions, get to know someone, and understand their point of view or maybe their why of why they behave, it doesn't always excuse it. But if we can understand where they came from, it makes a big difference.
A couple questions and you're there. If you just ask questions.
My dad always asks, what's your name to the person, that's serving us food. He's like, oh, that's a beautiful name.
Right.
And then he'll ask her or him a few other questions. And so I learned that from my dad a long time ago growing up.
Yeah, I just encourage everybody, just talk to people. Mm-hmm. Ask them questions. When you go to an office building and a receptionist is out front, talk to her a little bit. Ask her questions, what's going on, because most people wouldn't. And it's those little things I think make a big difference. In your book, at the end of each chapter, you have areas where you can write down notes and things. So it's more like I look at it as you can study it a little bit and really take notes. What were you trying to do with that as you went through the book?
Well, I didn't want it just to be something that somebody checked off their list and said, okay, I did this. So for my company, Crescendo Leadership Development, my tagline is turn your learning into action. And that's what I wanted the book to be as well. What did you learn from this chapter? What are some things that can be applied in your life currently today? And so it's actionable things and questions to make them think differently.
So you can use it every day in the business world and whatnot, or whatever world you're in. Right? Yeah. Tell us a little bit about the mental side of maybe a little bit of working out or feeling better or getting your energy level up. As far as a lot of this has to do with the mental side, with how you perceive things, how you think. Talk a little bit about how important you think it is to have a better mindset with your physicality and working out and doing things.
You know, I saw this quote recently. It was, if you're tired of starting over, then stop giving up.
That's a good one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm glad you like that one.
Got to think about that a second.
And so it's true. It is a mental thing, right? I have always wanted to get healthy and get in shape. And so you can ask my husband how many DVDs we have at home, but they don't work unless you actually do them.
Right.
So it doesn't matter if you just buy it. It's that having to put it into practice. And so whether it's working out, eating differently, drinking your water, or being kind to others, being generous, it takes practice. And that means setting a goal, making smaller goals, and then just working towards that big thing.
It's hard to be upset with somebody if you're giving, or if you're trying to be kind to somebody. It's hard to be upset. You know, if you're giving back to people, or at least trying to talk to them or whatnot, it's hard to be upset. So that's another good way to do it. So keep telling us more about your book. I want to promote your book more. What else do you have that you want to talk about?
Well, so in the book, I talk about some personal strategies, personal stories.
Right.
So
Do you want to share some of those?
Sure.
Okay.
So I have always been accused of being too happy and too positive. Okay. And so, were you surprised?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think that's a good thing, isn't it?
Well, for some people, they will tell me, if you had my life, you wouldn't be so happy. I'm like, well, tell me about it. And so I listen. And then I'll ask them, but what makes you think I've not had any of my own personal tragedies? Well, because you're happy. It's a choice, right? Every day when I wake up, it's a choice. I can look at today as another gift that I get to live today, and I can choose to be happy. Now, some days I have a bad day. I don't get it right all of the time, but I've had my own personal struggles. So one thing you had asked me was what got me here.
Right.
And when I was in college, I had befriended a guy. We were just friends. We went to school together. And somewhere along those lines, he blurred that friendship into something more. I was not interested in him. I had a boyfriend that I was dating, and that was the path I was down. But he decided to take matters into his own hands. And so you can imagine then he kidnapped me by gunpoint, and we'll just let the rest of the story unfold in the book.
Right.
And so I could have let that situation that happened to me destroy me, or I could choose to look at I'm still alive and I have another opportunity to continue to live. But in that moment going on, I thought I was going to die. I didn't think I was going to live another day after what I went through. So we can become victims of our circumstances, Gary, and we can let that being a victim of our thoughts, or we can become victors. And I didn't just say, okay, I'm going to be a victor today over this. I went through counseling. I had to find the good to get to where I'm at today.
Do you think that made you, in a strange way, a better person? That trauma?
Probably. I mean,
Made you stronger?
maybe stronger.
Stronger.
Maybe look at things differently.
Different perspective.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so, well, that's interesting because, somebody thinks they're really exciting and they're positive, and how do you get that way? Well, obviously, we all know we have to work at it. You have to work at it every day. But a lot of people have some real hurts in their mindsets, in their worlds, with their families or whatever they've done. And I think it's interesting to how you can control your mind. It's part of you. It's not going to leave you, but use it to your benefit going forward of teaching people or helping people.
Yeah.
And don't you see your book as very helpful to people, to get them excited, to get them, there's more to it than just going to work and that's it? And,
Yeah.
I mean, how do you see your book being used with most folks?
So I've actually had some people purchase it and then reach out and say, we're doing this as a book study, as a book group. And so they've been meeting once on each chapter, and then they talk about it. I've had some churches reach out and say, we're going to do this with our women's group. I've had companies ask me to come and do the workshop around the strategies in this book. And then I hope to also be able to keynote and get that out there as well.
Tell us a little bit about your faith and how that's helped mold your mindset and your book.
Yeah.
as it's grown over time. Just tell us a little bit, if you would.
Yeah, my faith's really important to me. And so when all that situation happened, I was going to a Christian college at the time. And so I have several people that say, why are you not mad at God for what happened to you? Or are you not mad at the world? Or are you not mad at whatever? And I could be, and I probably was for a while. But to be my best self, I know that if I don't like get up in the morning and spend some time doing my devotions or maybe time in prayer or whatever it is, I'm not my best self throughout the day. And so there is something to be said about what we connect to and how we surround ourselves with the right type of music and what the right type of people. Or, they say you are what you eat. Well, I think you are what you listen to, and you are with who you spend the most time with. And so if you are listening to negative things or music that's filled with hate, then guess what? That changes that mindset, and we start to think a little bit, right? It's got that subliminal messaging that comes through. But I choose to listen to more positive music. Or, no, don't get me wrong, I love my 80s still. And so I've got some of my, my fun music. But that whole diving deeper into my faith is what's made me stronger.
I think that's a good point. If you're hanging around people that are negative all the time, that just wears you out. And I think that's one thing that's kind of exciting about working out or doing something, whether it's a walk, like you said, drink more water. If you start hanging around people that are, have a different mindset, here we go, and we're back to the book mindset, that do work out, then you start to have a camaraderie with those folks. And then the other people that maybe you didn't have that kind of rapport with, and it might be just set around maybe eating or drinking or whatever people do socially. It's amazing what happens to you if you just kind of change your environment a little bit and your thought process and just do little by little. And it takes discipline. I think working on your mind to be positive, like if I was sitting on a tarmac, it'd take me a few seconds to kind of group myself, or at least in my mind, to go, hey, you got to calm down here a little bit. What are you going to do about this? But I think once you start in with working on your mind, there's no alternative. You're on the tarmac. There's nothing you can do.
Right.
So why not, look at the positive if there is one, and rather than just go down to see a negative.
So it's funny because when I introduce myself, I'm usually like, hi, my name's Karen. That doesn't make me one. And for people who understand that whole meme,
Right.
the Karens are the jerks yelling and screaming at the world and at a person. And as I sat in the airport about a month or so ago when I got delayed in Dallas, like not just delayed, like I had to spend the night in Dallas. I just watched person after person after person in line talking to the person behind the desk, yelling and screaming as if they're the ones that decided to say, you know what, wouldn't it be fun if we just canceled everyone's flights today?
Right.
And they just took the brunt of it and they just kept smiling. And by the time I got up, before I said anything, I said, wow, you are doing such a good job handling all of this criticism today. And the gal behind the counter, she looked at me, and for a moment, I thought she was going to cry. And she's like, thank you.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. It's the poor people behind the desk. They're just looking at their computer and they're just, but they're taking the brunt of it. And I can understand why people are frustrated.
Sure.
I had a flight to Austin. I was going back just to Dallas, which I think is only like, I don't know, a 40-minute flight. It's almost like I want to get on my bike and ride up there. Take a little longer than 40 minutes, but it was like 3 or 4 delays. And then, of course, I knew I'd missed my connection once I got to Dallas and getting home. But I was in the store. I think I was getting some gum or something, and a guy goes, hey, how's your day going? I go, well, I'm kind of down here. I'm waiting around, and I don't know when I'm going to get out of here. And he kind of looked at me. He says, well, you know what's going on, don't you? I said, no, tell me, feed me, help me. He said, it's a pilot shortage. So a lot of times, there's a lot of pilots that have retired. I don't think we replenish the stock. We get into where there just aren't pilots, and they don't tell you that. Because I think it'd even get wilder in an airport if they go, well, there's not enough pilots here to man the craft here. So.
And if people understood the why, that might make a big difference, right? Because
True.
I personally wouldn't want a pilot who is working an extra shift
Right.
that is so tired
Right.
that they should. And I'm sure there's regulations of how much time they can fly
Right.
anyway. But the point is that we push and push and push because we're people that want and want and want,
Right.
instead of stopping to understand how do we make this better for others as well as ourselves.
Do you think, when you wrote the book, do you think it's getting worse? It's more negative Do you think it was the same negative when your parents were younger? How do you see that as, we're more, everything is so readily available. There's Instagram, Facebook, news 24/7. And I don't know about you, but doesn't it seem like most news is really kind of negative?
Mm-hmm.
And it just goes on and on and on, and we fill our minds with so much. I think we need to refresh ourselves. We need to step back. We need to slow down a little bit, and we need to work on our minds a little bit and what we enjoy and our families and our children, our kids and grandkids. How do you see that over the last, 50 to 100 years when your parents were younger? Do they talk about it? Or how do you see it going down the road here?
I think it was definitely different growing up. I mean, if I'm going to date myself, I did all my high school papers on a typewriter, right? So we didn't have this connectivity. We knew to come home at night when the street lights went on.
Right.
I remember the news, right before the news would be like, it's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are?
Right.
And you're right. We are fully connected now with phones and news and social media that everything spreads so much quicker. And it's never good news. It's typically, last week a celebrity committed suicide, or another CEO embezzles money, or jobs are being lost, or COVID is coming back, or right. And so that gets people in this alarm state of, oh my gosh, right? And so we worry and we have this anxiety and we have this stress instead of stopping to go, okay, let's just maybe limit how much
Right.
of that we're going to hear. It's always going to be true that there's going to be bad news, but how much are we going to fill our lives and our day with it?
Right. Well, when I was a kid, there was 2 channels, it seemed like. Well, there might have been 3. But CBS, NBC, and ABC. And I don't even think ABC around. It was Chet Huntley and David Brinkley and Dan Rather. No, not Dan Rather. He might have been part of it. Walter Cronkite. You've heard of those names.
I do.
And that's the only place you got your news. And it was usually just before supper. You'd sit down, my dad would come home, and you'd get a little bit of it. And that was it. And it just seemed like they'd report it. And we all believed it then. I mean, that's what it was.
Sure.
And that was all you heard. And all day long, you're on the playground or playing with kids. You didn't get all that information dump on you constantly. So I think we have to work harder on our mindset. I think we have to work harder at trying to stay positive. And not that you're just going to walk around every day bubbly and happy and be the greatest, but it is something I think it's important to be aware of.
Agreed.
And working with companies and working leadership development that you do, what's it like for you personally to see the growth in companies and the growth in attitudes? Tell us a little bit about the mindset that you have and then seeing people grow.
Well, let's take your company for a moment. I started working with you in 2016?
Has it been that long?
Yeah.
Was I as gray then or not?
I
It
don't
might have been. I don't remember. I don't remember 16, 17.
So, and from where we are from then till now, right? And coming in and laying some foundational things with leadership development and doing performance reviews and connecting leaders with their teams. And we had to also allow natural attrition to work its way through, or sometimes forced attrition, right? If someone didn't have the right attitude and they were on the team, we saw a lot of gossip. We saw a lot of breakdown in relationships. And now you've got a solid company with solid people, and you should be able to keep your hands off of things working on the business, the everyday things. We have a great group of marketing people that take on, and more than our marketing group, right? We had other individuals that came together and they put together your Christmas party. Right. You don't even have to think about stuff like that. And they just take it and do it. And so empowering people, growing people, letting them see where they add value, and then adding value to people. And very different culture now than however many years ago.
Right.
And it does bring me joy when I work with clients and customers, whether individually, by teams, or by organization, to see that change happen. And again, it takes time and practice.
Well, if you think about a workforce, you spend more time there than you do with your spouse or children or whatnot. So you want to make it a good climate for people to have fun. I noticed this year we had one of the fun things for me is we have a Halloween pumpkin carving contest. And I don't know, I think probably 10, 15 folks entered into it. And I think it started at 3 and it's done at 5. You got 2 hours to carve a pumpkin, then we pick the best 3 pumpkins. So yep. I couldn't believe the number of people that worked on it and had fun with it. That's kind of neat for me to see that activity. So have a little fun when you're working, because work's work. Work's always going to be there. It's going to be here today. It's going to be here tomorrow. There's always things going on. We're preparing for a snowstorm. We're prepared for the winds. We're prepared for no heats. We're, a lot of things that we went through in meetings this morning. So we're getting our minds wrapped around it, but then we're handling it.
Yeah.
The people will handle it.
Even you're different, right? When I first met you, it was I expect everyone to work as hard as I have and as long as I have. And now the mindset is more flexibility. Let people get their work done. We have, things that we've added. So we didn't have a marketing team back then, and now we do. We didn't have an employee action committee, which is the group of individuals that plan the Halloween party or the Christmas party. And we did a family picnic this year. We have cookouts with the entire company once a month on Fridays. We have we volunteer. We go to Camp Courageous, right? So a lot different now, where you've incorporated fun and play into the workday and giving back.
Right. I've got to put a plug in for Camp Courageous. That's one of my favorite charities. And just if you don't know much about it, you should look it up. But what a great property that is in Monticello, and a great calling for people to take care of handicapped children that are severely handicapped. And they get a week up there, and they can do all kinds of fun things. It's just a neat place. Charlie Becker does a great job up there.
Yeah, and it's all year round. It's not just a summer thing, for sure.
Right.
And even this year at your Christmas party, the generosity of your employees, when you asked them to bring a toy,
Right.
the table was overflowing with toys for Tots.
Right.
So it's what you give is, I believe, what you'll get.
Right. No, it's a great mindset. So anyway, do you have anything else? Are you going to go on to a TED Talk?
I
You're
am.
working on that, right?
I am. I actually have already been approved, and I've applied to 3 different ones. So fingers crossed that one of those have come through. And if not, I've got a few more that I'm prepping to do.
Good.
So.
Well, until you started talking about TED Talk, I didn't even know what a TED Talk was. So at least then I looked it up, and they're pretty neat. I've listened to a few of them, and the people that speak there are always wonderful. So anyway, today I've been here with Karen Schumacher, and More Than Your Mindset is her book. Just came out. I highly recommend it. So hopefully you can get one. You can order them on Amazon. So thanks, Karen, for coming in today. It's been great.
Thank you,
it's been
Gary.
fun.
Yeah.